The second hand of the clock echoed through the halls of Morgan Manor. Maggie tossed a tennis ball in the air for what seemed to be an eternity as she lay on her bed. A glimpse of movement dashed past her door. The tennis ball came crashing down onto her face. Tossing it aside, she crept from her bed to the doorway and peeked around the frame. Nothing. The air in the hall was much colder than in her bedroom, sending a chill down her spine. Just then, a hand rested on Maggie's shoulder. "Easy there. I've been calling you. Dinner is ready," her mother, Sarah, said. Maggie clutched her chest. "Mother, you frightened me." Sarah chuckled. "I'm sorry, dear. Now, let's get you washed up." The halls of Morgan Manor hadn't changed much since it was built hundreds of years ago. Maggie detested them. Never warm and never quite bright enough. She hadn't wanted to move into the manor, but her father, Tom, had insisted. "Just give it a chance, Mags. I have many memories roaming these halls," he had said months before. "You learn to love it." So far, she hadn't. The doors creaked, the faucets leaked, and sometimes the entire house groaned. Every room was entirely too dark and dank, never allowing the sun to permeate its corridors. Townsfolk treated the family as pariahs, always whispering as they passed by. "You know what they say about that place. It's haunted," they'd murmur, never allowing their children to speak to Maggie. She hated the ghost stories and thought adults gossiping about them was foolish. Maggie trotted down the grand staircase behind her mother and turned into the dining hall. As always, the table was freshly set for by the maid, Nellie. Maggie hated Nellie too. She was an infernal old woman, with no patience or sense of humor, always annoyed and fussing. Maggie had never seen a smile cross Nellie's face. Perhaps the thing Maggie hated most about the maid was how she practically ignored the existence of children. "Nellie is old-fashioned," her father had said. In her day, children were to be seen, not heard. Maggie thought that was foolish as well. What child could possibly stay silent? Maggie pushed peas around on her plate when she felt the splatter of a carrot hit her cheek. Her younger sister Charlotte sat across the table, snickering. Maggie reared back her spoon loaded with peas, and despite Charlotte's pleas, let them fly. One landed directly atop Charlotte's platinum hair. Maggie snorted with laughter. "Margaret Elizabeth Morgan." Sarah scolded. "That's it. To your room you go." But Charlotte Maggie began to protest. "Now," her mother growled in a tone that left no room for explanation or excuses. Charlotte stuck her tongue out as Maggie passed her, and Nellie glared as she gathered the stray peas. Maggie stomped every step of the way to her room and slammed the door. It wasn't fair being the older sibling. Charlotte never got in trouble. She threw herself down on her bed once more and sobbed quietly until the tick of the second hand pulled her to sleep. Something startled Maggie awake. It was now pitch black in her room, save for a sliver of moonlight shining through the drapes. Maggie struggled to adjust her eyes to the darkness. She made out the shape of her dollhouse, her bookshelf, her armoire. Then she saw it. A lady, impossibly tall, with pale gray skin, looming in the corner of the room. Long dark hair framed her face, but Maggie could make out two dark hollows where her eyes used to be. Maggie tried to scream as the woman inched towards her in a slow, jerky motion, but nothing came out. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the blankets. The woman raised her long arm until her finger reached her lips, indicating for Maggie to stay quiet. Her mouth twisted into a grin as she neared the edge of the bed. Maggie was now struggling to gasp for air, her eyes squeezed tightly shut. She felt the edge of her bed sink as the woman sat down. In a sudden burst of adrenaline, she bolted from the bed and ran through the hall, finally able to scream. As she reached her parents' corridor, they burst from their bedroom door. She ran straight into her father's arms. "What on earth happened?" her mother asked. Tears streamed down Maggie's cheeks, and she began to sob. "There was a woman in my room with no eyes." Maggie didn't miss the gulp in her mother's throat, though she put on a brave face. "Oh, honey, you've just had a bad dream," her father coaxed as he stroked her hair. "No, father," she sat on my bed. "I felt it," Maggie wailed. Tom rubbed her back in an attempt to console her. "Why don't we go check it out?" Maggie shook her head fervently. "No." "Fine. You stay here with Mom, and when the coast is all clear, I'll let you know." Maggie hesitantly nodded. By now, Charlotte was clinging to one side of Sarah's robe, and Maggie clung to the other. A few moments later, Tom reappeared shrugging. "No ghastly women," he teased. "But I do want to show you something." He motioned for the three of them to follow him back to Maggie's room. The lights were now on, and in the corner where Maggie had seen the woman stood a tall coat rack. "I had Nellie put this in today. I should have told you. Your mind must have played a trick on you, love." Maggie gazed up at the coat rack, unable to see it as the woman. "I'm not sure," she trailed off. "Well, we are. Aren't we, dear?" Tom said, pulling Sarah close to him, his arm around her waist. Sarah, who looked as though she may be sick, faintly smiled and nodded, Charlotte still clinging to her side. As the three of them turned to leave Maggie's room, she called out, "Please, can I sleep with you tonight?" Tom glanced at Sarah. "No, love. You've got to face your fears, right? If I let you sleep with us tonight, I'm teaching you to run from them. That's not good, is it?" Maggie shook her head, but glanced at her mother, hoping she'd chime in. Sarah looked away. Maggie thought she saw the glint of a tear streaming down her cheek. "Right then, let's all get some rest," Tom declared, rising from Maggie's bed. He kissed her forehead, and the three of them retreated down the hallway. As soon as the light shut off, Maggie stared at the coat rack. She closed her eyes for a few moments, then repeated the process, trying to recreate the woman she'd seen before. By dawn, Maggie was sure of a few things. The coat rack was not what she had seen. Ghost stories were no longer foolish, and she was indeed living in a haunted house. At some point, after daylight, Maggie had drifted off into a dreamless sleep. She awoke around noon to Charlotte pouncing on her bed. "Wake up," she demanded. Maggie covered her head with a pillow and rolled over. Charlotte began to sing. "Lazy Mary, will you get up? Will you get up? Will you get up? Lazy Mary, will you get up? Will you get up today?" Maggie groaned. "I'm tired, Charlotte. Leave me alone. Who am I to play with then? Nellie?" Maggie chuckled and sat up. "Fine, but only because you're too funny to be stuck playing with an old grump like Nellie." Charlotte giggled and jumped out of the bed. "Come on then. I want to go to the woods today." Maggie sighed as she threw back the covers. She didn't like the woods. She preferred the garden or the game room. The woods, like most of the manor, were creepy. Maggie headed to the kitchen for a breakfast snack. She heard the screen door slam and saw Nellie as she rounded the corner. "Was that Charlotte?" Maggie asked. Nellie huffed and puffed, ignoring the question. Maggie shrugged and walked out the screen door, sticking her tongue out behind Nellie's back. Outside, Charlotte was running through the yard chasing butterflies. Maggie smiled. The girls were only 4 years apart, but it felt like ages to Maggie. Just last night, they had both been horrified and clutching their mother's robe. Now Charlotte hadn't a care in the world. "Nellie is a joy as always," Maggie called. Charlotte giggled. "Why do you suppose Daddy keeps her around?" Maggie shrugged. "I Don't know. She's dreadful, and so is her cooking. Tom rounded the corner of the manor just then. When he saw the girls, his eyes lit up with joy. My princesses, how are we today? Better than last night, I hope. He pulled them both into a tight hug. Daddy, we were wondering why you keep Nellie around, Charlotte said matter-of-factly. Tom chuckled. Nellie is an old family friend. Her mother and her mother's mother both served our family for many years. She's not the most pleasant, but she's good at her job, and she's loyal. Never missed a day of work, that one. Charlotte pondered on that information. Maybe you should buy her some chocolates and jewelry. Why on earth would I do that? Tom asked through laughter. Because she's always in a mood. When Mummy is in a mood, you buy her chocolates and jewelry. Tom howled with laughter. Maggie rolled her eyes. He does that for Mom because she's his wife Charlotte, she said, slightly annoyed by the attention she was getting. Charlotte shrugged. Maybe we'll try that one day, see if it works, Tom winked. Now, I've got to get some work done. You girls run along and play. Be back by supper time. The girls nodded and headed towards the woods, Maggie a few paces ahead of Charlotte. What's your problem? Charlotte asked bluntly. Haven't got one. Maggie stomped even further ahead. Fine. Let's play hide and seek, Charlotte demanded. I'll hide. Maggie rolled her eyes once more. Charlotte always hid in the same spot, a tiny cottage their father had built for them to play in. 1.2. 3. Maggie counted slowly. She knew if she counted or found Charlotte too fast, she would spend the rest of the evening pouting. Ready or not, here I come. She called out, half-heartedly. Maggie wandered through the woods, lazily, gazing at the various plants and trees. She followed the worn path to a babbling brook and took a seat on the riverbank. She sat there stewing in her jealousy. Everyone loves Charlotte more than me. An odd feeling came over Maggie as if she had done and thought this very thing before. However, something she couldn't quite place was different. Suddenly, Maggie was a few years younger. Charlotte was beside her. I want to go swimming, she whined. No, Charlotte. Mom said no swimming without an adult. Charlotte stomped her foot. But I want to. Stop acting like a baby. Charlotte stomped away into the woods. After a moment, Maggie rose to go look for her. She followed the path to the cottage. As she neared it, she saw the screen door blowing in the wind. She stepped into the cottage. Charlotte? No answer. Charlotte, answer me. The faint noise of the rocking chair in the other room creaked on the floorboards. Charlotte, I know you're in here. Maggie stopped in her tracks. In the rocking chair was not Charlotte at all, but the tall lady with no eyes. Her mouth twisted into the same sick grin as before. She beckoned Maggie to come closer with her long, bony finger. This time Maggie was able to scream and run. She bounded through the forest until she ran directly into a tree branch. It knocked her flat on her back. She was out cold. When Maggie came to, she was back on the riverbank. Did I fall asleep? Was that a nightmare? She dusted off her pants and called out for her sister. No answer. She headed for the cottage just as she had in her dream. Her heart thumped in her chest, and her palms became damp with sweat as the cottage came into view. She took a deep breath and entered. Maggie called out over and over with no response. The rocking chair was empty, as was the rest of the cottage. Maggie began to panic. She ran towards the manor, silently praying Charlotte had returned without her. As she dashed into the kitchen, Nellie and her mother were preparing dinner. Ah, just in time, Sarah said. Did Charlotte come back already? Maggie blurted out breathlessly. "Oh, for God's sake," Nellie mumbled and left the room. Sarah stared blankly at Maggie. "Is she here?" Maggie asked again. Sarah turned away, filling her arms with food dishes. "Mom?" Maggie asked incredulously. "Everything is okay, Mags. Get washed up for dinner," Sarah replied, her voice entirely unconvincing. "Mom, I'll see you at the table in 10 minutes, Sarah said with finality and exited the room. The events from the entire past 24 hours had Maggie's mind reeling with confusion. She sighed as she climbed the stairs to wash up for dinner. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. As Maggie entered the dining room, she breathed a sigh of relief when she saw Charlotte in her usual spot. She figured Charlotte must have gotten scolded for running off because she wasn't her usual chatty self, nor did she look up from her plate. Sarah also stared at her untouched plate sullenly. "Why so glum?" Tom teased. Only Maggie smiled back at him. "There's one smile. How about another?" he said to Charlotte. Sarah abruptly stood from the table. "Excuse me, I'm not feeling well," she mumbled as she exited the room. The three of them finished their dinner in silence. Charlotte left first without a word, then Tom. He ruffled Maggie's hair on the way out. She finished her dinner and retreated to her room for bed. As she lay in bed, she heard faint noises of her parents arguing. "It's disturbing," Sarah shouted. Maggie couldn't make out Tom's words, but it was clear that he was pleading. Though she struggled to listen to the argument, she was exhausted from the lack of sleep the night before. Maggie drifted off to sleep. "Maggie," someone whispered. Maggie sat straight up in bed, ready to bolt. "It's me, Mum," Sarah whispered. Maggie let out a deep sigh of relief. "I need you to come with me." "Where?" I don't know yet. But you've got to trust me, Mags. We've got to go now." "What about Dad?" Maggie asked. "Well, no, not right now. He's not ready yet." "What about Charlotte?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, honey, please just get dressed. I'll explain everything in the car." Maggie shook her head. "I'm not leaving them. We can't." "You can't." Sarah held a hand over her mouth to conceal a sob. She took a second to compose herself, then in a stern voice said, "Margaret Elizabeth Morgan, get your coat on and quietly get in the car." Now, Maggie did as she was told. The darkness surrounding them and her mother's behavior left her uneasy and shaky. But somehow they made it safely out of the house. Neither of them spoke until they had put miles between themselves and the manor. "Mum, what is going on? Why did we leave Dad and Charlotte?" Sarah pulled the car over into a parking lot. She placed her face in her hands and let out a gut-wrenching sob. "Maggie, Charlotte died 3 years ago." Maggie furrowed her brow in confusion and shook her head. "What? Have you gone mad?" "She was just at dinner with us hours ago," Maggie exclaimed. Sarah shook her head violently and grabbed Maggie's hand. "No, darling. Charlotte fell playing in the woods 3 years ago. She hit her head on a rock and died shortly after due to the trauma. We left the manor to try and make a fresh start for you. You two were so close." Sarah paused to conceal another sob. "Your father insisted we return. He became obsessed. He knew spirits had inhabited the manor when he was younger. He brought a slew of mediums and conjurers in, until one finally did bring her back. But it's not her. The spirit does bad things Charlotte would never do." Sarah hesitated. "I believe the spirit wants to hurt you." I think she manifested as the ghost you saw in your room last night. That may be her true form. I don't know what it is. I just know it's not my Charlotte, and it's no longer safe for you. But, Dad, Maggie wept. Your father wholeheartedly believes he's been given a second chance with Charlotte. In his grief, he's gone completely mad. I couldn't bear another second of listening to him talk to a ghost like it's our baby. It's just too much. Maggie wailed out in pain as memories came flooding back to her. Memories the tall lady had tried to distort. Memories of finding her beloved sister, Charlotte, dead 3 years ago.